Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast for founders, entrepreneurs, dreamers, and leaders navigating the journey of growth. In each episode, we get into the setbacks, the rebuilds, the pivots, and the lessons learned along the way. These are honest conversations with leaders who face challenges head on and found success in business and in life. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Joshua Lee, founder of First Light Studios. Joshua helps legacy brand owners bring their products into the modern digital marketplace without losing the heart of what made them successful in the first place. He partners with founders who've built trusted, value-driven businesses often over decades, but haven't yet cracked Amazon, Walmart, or social commerce. His work sits at the intersection of e-commerce strategy, stewardship, and long-term brand integrity. If you care about future-proofing your company without selling out, this conversation is for you. Hi, Josh. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good, Sonia. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know, I'm excited. I know it's been a while since we booked this, so it's finally good to get on the same page and go through this
Finally.
episode. All right. Well, our audience already knows all about you and who you are, so let's just get right into it so we don't waste any time.
Yeah.
Um, what first drew you to working specifically with legacy brand owners instead of early stage startups?
That's a great question. My first career out of college was in the venture capital field. So I actually had a
Mm,
chance to work with young entrepreneurs and older entrepreneurs. The average age that I found was actually 40s to 50s. But since that career a while ago, I ventured into e-commerce, which I've been in for the past 8 years. And what I found was that legacy brands, legacy manufacturers particularly, have a really big need for e-commerce readiness, if you will, being able to be found online, searched online, and purchased online. And so I just happened to have a lot of conversations with legacy brand owners, generational owners of a certain brand that need a lot more help in this space. And so um, it's really that's kind of how I landed on legacy brands, if you will.
mhm.
It was, there's a big need for every segment of a company's age. So early
Yeah.
stage all the way to legacy, there's a big need, but the way that legacy owners operate, it's a little bit different. So usually they're more principled in the
Hmm.
fundamentals of business. They want a business case. This should be true for all stages, but um, in the early stages, it tends to be less planning, more execution,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
appreciate as well. But that's kind of how I ended on legacy.
Yeah. I actually love that you landed on legacy and you've explained that because it's so funny. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day and they were explaining to me how they are a manufacturing company, which is those legacy systems.
Yeah.
And they were like, our company has grown dramatically over the years, but yet our processes and our infrastructure is still like a startup.
Mm.
And I'm like, so what's your biggest issue? They're like, we're running this massive billion-dollar company with Excel spreadsheets. So I see exactly what you're saying, the need for, there's such a big business in legacy, but
Mhm.
it's not considered sexy business, if you know what I mean.
Yes,
And
yes,
so a lot of
exactly.
people sort of stay away from it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of it too, and you hit the nail on the head is that once you get to a certain size and employees have been there for 20, 30 years,
Hmm.
the procedures, the way of thinking, it stays in a certain routine and
Yeah.
they're not able to really change. And so a lot of times that transformation is a little bit slower. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of,
It's kind of like if it's not broken, don't fix it until it's really broken.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think one thing that we have noticed is good leaders, uh, a lot of times they'll prepare for transitions later on.
Mm,
So transitions of ownership, and they recognize that they're not going to be around. So the current CEO or the current, family member that runs it, the current investor, they may have plans to exit in the future. So they're
Mm,
thinking about what they need to transition. And so that's kind of where we come in and we help them think about and give them options for what they need to change. And so um, yeah, I would say the number one thing, this is not what you asked me, but the number one blocker we've seen is a block in leadership. So it's
yeah.
those who aren't able to make a decision, make the hard decisions, look at all the options and pick a route. Those are the companies that tend to not do so well later down the road.
So is it because they're just so used to doing things a certain way, or is it because they're afraid of change?
I think it's a combination of both, but I think it seems that the number one factor is fear.
Mm,
Um, Sometimes we're in conversations for 2 or 3 years before we end up doing any sort of work with them. And that's because they're still sort of humming and hawing on what to do, if you will. And so it's usually not till some critical life event where they find out some health scare or something like that, where
mm.
they're like, okay, I have to move now. But then at that point, you're trying to make really quick changes in a short amount of time. And so y the results just aren't as great.
So tell me, what's the biggest internal fear you hear from legacy founders when they think about going to an Amazon or a Walmart marketplace?
So the biggest fear that a lot of manufacturers used to have is a conflict of interest between their customers, which are their wholesale customers. Traditionally, manufacturers used to sell to distributors or suppliers. And so those were the relationships they've had for decades. And a lot of manufacturers, they didn't want to compete with their customers, their distributors and supplier and their wholesalers. And so they would never sell direct to the consumer. So they
Mm,
would never open up their own storefront. They would never do that. But since the pandemic, with the rise of online shopping, e-commerce, that's really changed the narrative for a bunch of these manufacturers. I remember talking with a really big um, auto parts manufacturer.
hmm.
They make brake pads and rotors. They're a fairly large company that you can find in AutoZone, O'Reilly, other auto parts store. And I remember talking with him one year, and he was like, "Hey, we don't want to do that because we'll make our wholesale customers upset." But after touching base with him more recently, the whole tune has changed. So the company is more open to going direct and selling direct, which means selling on their own website or selling and opening up their own Amazon storefront and
Hmm.
doing more work there. Um, but I would say that attitude has shifted and it's just part of how shoppers are shopping today.
Yeah.
There's less of a need for wholesalers and distributors with all people's contact information being online and it's not like it used to be. I wasn't around then where it's like no cell phones and it was all Rolodex based,
Yeah.
but it's not like that anymore. So I think that's where the change is happening and honestly, a lot of manufacturers are having that discussion right now in
Hmm.
this time. Um, in 2015, 2016, I mean 2026, they're discussing that internally right now. How do they want to approach that? So,
Yeah. So what happens to like the retailers that were traditionally distributing the products for these manufacturers? Are they going to miss out on business? What's the future of this whole new process? What does it look like?
well, I think if we back up a little bit and talk about even power dynamics in a marketplace, it's
Hmm.
about supply and demand. And depending on how popular your products are or becoming, the real power becomes if you can have inventory. So for popular manufacturers, they actually the power comes in who has inventory, and for manufacturers, sometimes they can't supply all the retailers, all their wholesale customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so for retailers, it really becomes how do we make sure that a manufacturer or a brand, if you will, is going to continue to keep us in stock. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, a big battle right now is, Walmart versus Amazon. And so for the top tier brands, if you will, both those players are trying to win over the brand and have them prioritize, you know, either Walmart as a channel or
Mm-hmm.
Amazon as a channel. And so those are sort of the discussions that a leadership team typically has. And those are really more reserved for brands that have sort of blown up on social media, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
are being refound or rediscovered. But I would say as a retailer, their business is growing, online retail is growing, um, and online in general is
Mm-hmm.
growing. So, um, it a lot of times it becomes how do we keep up with demand?
I mean, it's
Right.
funny because I know all about Amazon, but I had no idea that Walmart was trying to sort of do the same thing as Amazon. Because every time I think about Walmart, I think about it being a physical store. So it's interesting that they're also going down that route. So there is a lot of change coming down the road. But
Mhm.
why do strong offline brands struggle so much when they first move into the digital marketplaces?
I think it's two parts. The first we kind of touched on is the way of thinking. So the business model for selling online is a bit different. And so
Mm-hmm.
as a business owner, a lot of times you think about profitability and scalability. And so the way that you do it for wholesale is you get an order, you ship your products, and then you get paid. But a lot of times for online, you get an order, you ship it out, but then there's a bunch of fees along with it,
Yeah.
including advertising. And when you go the wholesale route, there's really not much to advertising other than trade show, maybe emails every now and again. But with online sales, depending on how sophisticated you want to get, paid advertising is sort of a must in this day and age
Yeah.
because of the level of competition that, you know, maybe two glassware manufacturers want
Yeah.
to compete for the same space. And there just isn't that much space on say if you open up an app, there's only a couple top
Yeah.
slots.
I always say like B2B is the best business to be in. It's really hard to market to consumers, especially
Mhm.
when it's such a competitive space. So when you have like similar products, I could see it being really expensive.
Mhm. Yeah, B2B is really a big core part of a lot of businesses. Um, I would say B2C, it's important not just to help customers get what they want when they want, based on whatever
Hmm.
platform they're shopping in, but also it's a bigger brand recognition piece. There's a lot of studies right
Yeah.
now that show customer loyalty is is not what it used to be. So shoppers, they're willing to jump different
Yeah.
brands if they're able to get it faster, quicker, it's a bit cheaper.
Yeah.
And so, with the new wave of Gen Z, millennials, Gen Alpha, those shoppers
Yeah.
coming, in the
They're
next
different.
decade, they
Yeah.
shop differently and they're not as brand loyal and they care about different things. So being online is not just to be able to be found and purchased, but it's actually to build some of that top of funnel marketing as well.
And credibility as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So when you partner with legacy brands, what's the first thing you look to protect?
It really depends on the client or the customer. And it depends. Usually there's two outcomes. One is preparing for sale, and
Hmm.
the other is keeping it within the family. And so if we're working with a company that's preparing for sale,
Hmm.
a lot of times we may work with a company that's owned by a private equity company. They've got
Right.
multiple different companies within them. And one that I can share is another sort of home and auto category. They had like 12 different very well-known brands. Sort of all detergent was one of them.
Mm,
And they, you kind of figure this out later down the road, but they were preparing for sale themselves. So they had been purchased by this private equity company. They're preparing for sale again. And we were involved in sort of that transition process. And so what they wanted to understand was how do we understand the profitability by SKU,
hmm
by channel, and really understand all the drivers for profitability. That profit becomes the main metric. And so, for me and for us, we think about how do we keep the heritage and the soul of the brand alive as we execute on a lot of these branding changes, pricing changes, policy changes
hmm
that impact wholesale customers and end users. And how do we make sure that we're competing not for today's market, but also for the market in the next 5 or 10 years? And so, um, I think we do what we can. We're not the owners of the brand, so we do what we can to really recommend sort of protecting the consumer, the shopper as well.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a lot of work. I mean, traditionally, like if for wholesalers, all they had to worry is just about distributing and wholesaling their product.
yeah,
Now they have end consumers. They got to think about the future. They got to think about all the different types of buyers. How do you go from just being a distributor to that's a complete business plan change? Like that's a lot of work.
it is. Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean by it's a different way of thinking.
hmm
And so I think the once they're able to transition though, they're usually in good hands. That
Okay.
transition can be as fast as 1 year. There's sort of a lead up to it when they think the first time they think we should be online, or if a business owner thinks we should sell online. It usually takes several months, could be years, for them to actually start actioning on it and start looking at what their options are and what that
Mm,
looks like. And so they might find a consulting firm. They might, want to talk with us or talk with their friends, their family about it, or any other company that has done it before. And
hmm
then usually about 6 to 12 months, they'll start make a decision and try to make it happen. But
Right.
they do move quite slow. Usually
Yeah,
one
I'm not. I'm
one
not. I'm not
year,
surprised.
yeah, 1 year at a time. So
Okay.
yeah, I was talking. I'm talking to this prospect right now. We're in sort of a consulting agreement, but they're like, yeah, we need to redo our website, and then they were like, we'll do it next year because it's like they just finished their budget, and so like we'll chuck it to next year. Like we're not even gonna
Yeah.
worry about it. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. So, what's the most common mistake you see brands make when launching on Amazon for the first time?
Amazon is a really big market. US e-commerce is 1.2 trillion
Wow.
2025. Amazon has about 500 billion of that. So 40 to 50% of that is Amazon. And the reason why I share that is when you couple that with the fact that Amazon in the United States, there's 200 million Prime users, customers that are paying for Prime monthly. There's like only 360 million people in the US, and like 20% is under 18, 5 or 6% is over the age of 80.
hmm
Basically, most people in America is on Amazon. And so if you're not taking a channel seriously, your largest channel seriously, your shoppers also won't take you seriously. It's a very
Oh.
cutthroat market. Competitors are using firms like us. They've got ex-Amazonians that are just trying to preserve their market share and also crush out competitors. And so if you don't know all the levers for success on the platform, you're not going to do very well.
Mm,
The only cases that you will do well for a little bit of time is if you get a lot of PR. So early stage companies, what we've seen, startups, maybe patent owners or somebody that launches for the first time, they'll get on Shark Tank, they'll get on some show, they'll have a really big lift of search volume.
yeah.
They'll capture that, but they'll be forgotten over time. And so how do you actually preserve that and make
Mm,
sure that that momentum, that velocity you're experiencing, you're capturing that into long-term growth and
yeah.
you're creating repeat customers from that. And that is a company initiative. It usually doesn't involve us,
Hmm.
but we can at least advise on those areas. So if you have a
Yeah.
huge influx of traffic, how do you capture that and make them loyal to your brand? How do you bring them into your community and
Hmm.
your network? So
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like I'm listening to you and I'm like, as a consumer, if I'm online and I see like an ad for something, the first thing that I do is I go to Amazon to see if that product's on there because I know with Amazon, I'm gonna get shipped really
yep,
quick. The
yep,
price is gonna be,
yep,
reasonable. And there's been times where I've clicked the ad and I go to the actual website of where the product's being sold
mhm,
and the shipping is extra.
yeah,
The It's going to take like a month for me to get the package, and I'm like, forget this, I'll just go to Amazon and get it in a day or two, like, because it's there's no shipping costs, extra costs for me, there's no huge delays. So like as a consumer, my first go-to is I'm gonna go check Amazon. So I could see why they dominate 40% of the revenue there.
100%. And
Yeah.
it just also reminds me, when you're talking, it just reminded me, because you mentioned earlier that it's pretty difficult to for a manufacturer to start thinking about, different shoppers
Mm,
and channels of marketing and marketplaces, Amazon, Walmart, Target, their own website. It gets complex, and it reminds me of company when during my time as an investor in startups, I invested in early stage startups, so Series Seed, Series A companies.
mm,
Back then in 2014, 2015, 2016, pre-money valuations, they were typically under $5 million. And nowadays, I think it's like 15 or something. But I remember a lot of people said that marketplaces or B2B to C platforms were the hardest to scale because you had the
yeah.
business side, you have to figure that out, and then you got the consumer side. So you actually have two sets of customers. And when you're starting a business for the first time, you're usually not good enough to execute extremely well with limited resources on two channels.
Yeah.
So that's why you really want to build a business focused on one channel at first.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's why I always stick to B2B.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, usually it's the most profitable and it's just much easier.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the C side, the B2C side, it's so not it's so much more complicating because you have to think about advertising and it's just
Well, like
you
today your product could be like the product and tomorrow nobody likes it anymore.
yeah. Yeah, that's
Right.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the companies that end up doing well are companies that are actually able to pull that relational component that's so important in B2B, building
Hmm.
relationships, because those, even for us, those customers are with us for a very long time.
Yeah.
And customers that have been with us since we started, we're fairly young, 4 years old. We have a deeper relationship, not just on business, and we care
Yeah.
about them and their business. And so if you're able to somehow showcase that on the B2C side, that you care about their customers and you're showing up in their areas of interest,
Hmm.
that's actually what we've seen are sort of key ingredients that make a company do really well when they go B2C.
So tell me, how does succession planning change the way founders should think about e-commerce?
I think that's a really good question. I'm not a succession planner, but one thing that I know that a lot of these founders or, maybe second or third generation, they have valued is preparing for the next generation of customers and owners.
Mm-hmm.
So they're willing to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term benefits down the road. And so they're more disciplined. This comes down to more of a interpersonal leadership area.
Mm-hmm.
Their foundations are more grounded. So they're less about chasing the fads. So, for instance, a manufacturer, they might try and spin up a new product concept or idea, and
Mm-hmm.
they might try and innovate when in fact their product is still good. It just needs to be rebranded and packaged. But the shiny object, the cool thing to do is to think of a new product to start investing in. So that means new
Mm-hmm.
equipment, new machinery. Succession planning, it's less about doing those aspects, but making sure that the fundamentals of business, so your profit margin and those controls are in place.
Mm-hmm.
There are leaders across different parts of the organization. Even if you're a 10-person company, do you have people working there that want to be there, that are driven, that aren't um that are driven and aligned with your company values. I was gonna share some of ours, but some of these companies don't have those values, so it doesn't matter if they're, you know,
Yeah.
hungry, right? That may not be a
Yeah.
company value of theirs. Could be compassionate, I don't know, but
Yeah.
um just making sure that the people in the organization are prepared and they have what they need to
Mm-hmm.
take it and continue to grow it for the next or sustain it for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I think it's more about people leadership
Mm-hmm.
than some
Product innovation per se. But
exactly.
if you look at like Scrub Daddy, I think is a really good example
Mhm.
of a product because like
Mhm.
they're not reinventing the wheel. They're not
Yeah.
reinventing new products. They're not building new. All they're doing is, oh, we
Mhm.
have the Scrub Daddy, and then they did
Mhm.
the Scrub Mommy, and then
Yeah.
they did the Scrub Mini.
Yeah.
And I not that I buy them, but I've seen it because I remember
Yeah.
seeing them on Shark Tank, and
Mhm.
like I've gone to the store and I'm like, oh, they have the mommy version and they have the
Yeah.
mini. And I'm like, that's
Mhm.
genius because they're still using all the same equipment. They're
Yeah.
just taking a product, like you said,
Yeah.
and sort of reinventing the branding, the marketing around it. And they're still selling the exact same product, but they've been able
Absolutely.
to bring in a new revenue stream from it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's just a really easy way to make sure you're not spending a ton of money uh,
Hmm.
buying
On
equipment
research
and
and development.
totally, and you're just kind
Yeah.
of using what you got.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example.
Mm.
Um, so what's a hard lesson you've learned working with value-driven founders at scale?
The number one, yes, I was thinking so many, but I think when it really comes down to it, it's discipline. And it's staying disciplined to the plan or the goal that you've set from the beginning.
Mm,
And so starting with the end in mind, all these sort of terms that have come from books and other speakers, it really is true, but it takes a level of discipline that I myself am continually refining.
hmm.
But are you staying disciplined on one approach? And so that's actually where it becomes more of a challenge to start saying no to a lot of good opportunities that might come your way so that you're able to say yes to the one or two great opportunities. And so that I've seen as I've just seen that. And
Hmm.
most are disciplined and most are just focused.
Yeah.
And you just see that in their responses, you see that in their approach. They don't change it for anyone. So whether it's the way that they make decisions internally, they follow their process and they don't
Mm,
break away from it. And because they know it works
yeah.
and they're focused on a certain goal that I may or may not know about.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what it takes to be successful because
Yeah.
building a business is really hard
Yeah.
and it's extremely challenging. And
Yeah.
it's almost easier taking a business that's already going and taking it
Mm-hmm.
over because you already have
Yeah.
the blueprint, you already have the team.
And I think it's a little bit uh not that new brands and new companies are not doing it, but I think legacy companies that you what
Mhm.
you and I were talking about in the beginning, I think they have like a little bit of an upper hand there because they already know what their values are, they already know what they want to do, they have processes. So now they're just like we want to bring on a new division, we want to do something new, but we know what our
Yeah,
values are, what our core is, and what our processes are, and we're just going to
yeah,
keep doing that. But
absolutely.
implementing new research
Mhm.
development and products. So I think they
Yeah.
kind of have an upper hand. I could be wrong, but I feel like they
Mhm.
do.
Yeah, they do right now in terms of operating. And I would say there is a huge opportunity for new companies to continue to come online.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about the economy slowing down, or in certain segments,
Mm-hmm.
affordability is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of chatter about, sort of consumer confidence is not as high. There's a lot of chatter about that, but I would say if you are an entrepreneur, you're in the early stages, this is the best time. There's less
Yeah.
competition, and legacy companies, you know, get in. If you're particularly in e-commerce or online, get in before it starts getting way more competitive. It's
Yeah.
competitive now, but it's going to continue to get competitive as leaders in retail spaces. When they start coming online, and a lot of them are online,
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to be so much harder to stand out. There's a
Yeah.
lot of wide open opportunity in social right now, for instance. And so that's something we don't have time to touch on, but there's a lot of opportunities, so I wouldn't be
Yeah.
scared at all.
Mm-hmm.
Legacy brands are slower to move, but if they make a decision and they're moving, that might become a problem for a specific subcategory or category.
I mean, like, look at an example of Dollarama, right? They are now, their stock market went through the roof because, like you said, affordability, and
Yeah.
they sort of, took advantage of that, and they have a marketplace. It's affordable. People are leaving those traditional brands that they would normally go to and saying, I'm gonna not buy that brand name, but I'm gonna go here because I can afford it, right? So right now, there's
100%.
a huge opportunity as well for getting into a market of affordability.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
affordable products, even anything revolved around, and sort of retirement community. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty huge. So everything from healthcare, retirement homes, anything retirement related,
Yeah.
that's huge too. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it really depends what, an entrepreneur's personal strengths are and their interests. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Uh, so tell me, if a legacy founder feels behind digitally, what's the first smart move they should make this quarter in order to get online?
One thing we have everybody do even before they talk with us is go through a leadership readiness assessment. And it's just a questionnaire and it scores you on your company's readiness to
Mm,
go online. And it'll give you some tips on what you can do or what to think of, what questions to ask and talk about. Because we're not a consulting company, we're not a management consulting company, but a part of what we do has to be consulting.
mm-hmm.
It's just the nature of the business we're in for manufacturers. And so that would be the very first step is do an assessment of where everybody's at, how everybody's feeling about online, if they want to do it at all. different leaders will have different opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and some will want to do it, some won't. Some will want to give it away to a distributor, to a wholesaler to manage. So there's a company that went public recently called Pattern,
Mm.
but they're based in Utah, and they basically buy products from manufacturers, and they own the branding, and they own the the different channels on behalf of manufacturers and
Oh, wow.
wholesalers. Because as a manufacturer, sometimes they decide we don't want to get into the marketing game, we don't want to get into the customer service game. We want to just be a manufacturer, and that's our business. That's what we do
Yeah.
well. And
I don't
so
blame them.
exactly,
Customer service is tough.
exactly. Exactly. I'm not, sometimes I can be rude on the phone, there's different models like that that are emerging as well and
Yeah.
have proven itself to work well. And occasionally we'll do that model ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but we're really in the business of preparing, helping companies, legacy companies transform into thinking
Mm-hmm.
about e-commerce and into the future. So um, that's one thing I would recommend and do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, we're coming up on time, but before we wrap up, I want to ask you one last question. How do you personally define success when it comes to legacy and growth?
Success for me is it might be a little bit different, and it really becomes a question on your beliefs in life. So it really comes down to personal philosophy and spirituality.
Mm,
For me, I believe that success is defined by doing really doing what God wants me to do in this life. And so we've had tremendous business success last year,
mhm.
but it's not what defines me. When I was younger, that's what would define me. But I think as I'm
You,
learning
you
later on in
matured.
life, you mature, y- you realize that you would kind of trade all that away
Mm,
a happy home, for peace,
health.
for health. And I think to me, success is being able to become the person that God created you to be, whoever that person is.
That's great. I mean that's your own thing. That there's no wrong answer here.
Exactly, exactly. Now we do have business goals, and that
Of
we're that
course.
we're moving towards 1, 3, 10 year goal, and so we're on it. But
Yeah.
in terms of personal success and even business success for various companies, they may define it a little bit different.
Yeah. But you have your own set of, well, you have your integrity and you have your own set of dreams and goals and ambitions, and that's just the way you operate, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking about legacy industries and B2B versus B2C. I find it really interesting when I bring on speakers that are interested in talking about the things that people don't really talk about because it's
Mhm.
not considered, cool or sexy.
Right.
But I do find that like a lot of the businesses out there that do really well are those unsexy unpopular businesses because they happen to be a product that nobody knows how the back end of it operates. But there's all these people and all these companies behind it making it all happen. And I think it's really interesting to talk to have conversations about those types of businesses. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Sonia. Had a lot of fun today.
Awesome. I want to thank Josh for joining me today. Today's conversation was a reminder that growth doesn't have to come at a cost of integrity. If you're a founder thinking about how your brand survives and thrives in a digital first world, Josh brings a grounded, human approach to e commerce that's worth studying. Josh, thanks for the clarity and the stewardship you bring to this work. And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining me on this journey of learning and growth. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building through a challenge right now. You can also connect with us on social media and be part of a community that believes resilience is the real advantage. Remember, growth isn't linear, success isn't guaranteed, and setbacks are part of the process. What matters is how you execute. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.